Welcome to Horsemen. Hello. You are about to listen to the 7th episode of Horsemen called The Queen. If while answering the questions after episode 5, you felt that you were being led, that you were choosing answers that felt correct but didn't match your biography or your usual preferences, then you may have noticed that your dreams have begun to change. Perhaps in your dreams you have encountered curious characters or new and strange situations that feel familiar but have no context. If this is so, we encourage you to take note of these characters and settings. And if any of the characters in your dreams tell you their name, try to remember those names. This is important. The next protocol will be offered after Story 9, The Martyr. Episode 7, The Queen.
A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 1. Dr. Raymond Anadar met his wife in Montreal. The two of them were attending a conference held at McGill University entitled Upside Down, What We Least Suspect. The conference collected fringe theories in the sciences that shifted the common understanding of what is real, true, and measurable. Ray was there to present his work on what he called narrative therapy, or using story for healing. This was before he published his book, A Storied Guide to the Future. At that time, he only had a small clinic in Manchester, New Hampshire, where he was treating patients and collecting data on the outcomes of his treatments. Margaret de los Santos was attending the conference. She came from Sonoma County in Northern California, where she specialized in cranial sacral therapy and Reiki. Margaret had come to the conference with the intention of meeting and learning from a Dutch doctor who had developed a form of kinesiology that accurately diagnosed sensitivities and the nutritional adjustments needed for treatment. When she got to the conference, however, she learned of Raymond's lecture on narrative therapy, and something stirred in her. Stories? Well, that sounded very interesting. So she went. The room was about half full when the speaker nervously approached the podium. He was a slight man with dark hair combed over like an awkward teenager. His eyes were dark and fearful as he looked around the room, and for a moment she considered sneaking out. But then he spoke, or rather, he began to tell a story. "There was a cat," he said. He said it with a kind of intensity, not forced or even very loud, just intense, thick, full, and he followed it with a long pause. The pause was welcome because everyone in the room needed a fair amount of time to take in his words. A cat. And once everyone had successfully pictured a cat, he continued. He was a tired cat, a thin cat, a cat who knew he needed to eat something, anything, for if he didn't eat something soon, he would go mad. Everyone in the room, including Margaret, frowned with concern. Go mad? They felt many things in that moment, surprise, concern, but most of all curiosity. What was the cat going to do? So, said Dr. Raymond Anadar, now with a different voice, a more ordinary voice, an almost clinical voice, I want you to feel your body, especially your heart right now. Don't worry, I'm going to tell you more about the cat. I just need you to pay attention to how you're feeling. At this point, there was a lot of shifting and whispering. People were wondering what just happened. How was it that they were all swept away by this simple story? But they managed to do what Ray asked of them. They checked in with their bodies, and many nodded their heads when he said, "Your pulse rate is slightly elevated, and you feel a bit flushed or hot, aroused even." He looked around the room, and in that silence he seemed to be looking at everyone as if he could see right through them. "If I were to measure the level of histamine in your blood right now," histamine is a natural neurotransmitter and a major player in autoimmune inflammation like flushing and itchiness. Your levels would all be between 10 and 20% higher than normal. What this means is by offering you an image of a hungry, tired cat, I actually created a measurable autoimmune response in your body. Margaret was dazzled, as were the other participants. Clearly, this was not what anyone was expecting, but everyone agreed that there was something deeply true about what Ray was saying. Ray now showed a series of slides, images of things that are naturally red, like flowers and berries and canyon rock. Redness from a biological perspective, Ray continued, clicking forward to show the red of flowers and berries and then internal organs and blood, is connected to the liveliness of life. There's an excitement to red, an urgency. And if there's too much, it can be dangerous, as with inflammation. So many diseases and conditions that modern medicine treats with suppressant medication have inflammation at their root. And yet, we just saw how an image, a tiny story, can bring on a histamine response. That is, raise the level of inflammation in the body, just with a few words. It's sort of like a magic spell, don't you think? Like wizards used to do in fairy tales. Well, maybe there's truth in those stories. Maybe there's truth in all stories. Margaret was looking at the screen where Ray was showing pictures from old illustrated books of wizards, dragons, and brave knights in shining armor. But then her gaze lowered to look at the man, to look at the doctor who was opening up a world in her, who was stirring something powerful inside her. She studied his face. So ordinary, quite frankly, dark, combed-over hair, unremarkable features, slight build. But his voice, the voice could tell magic spells. When the lecture was over, she watched as he was surrounded by men and women who wanted to know more, to read whatever he had to offer them, to study with him, anything to learn this incredible power of his, this power to say words in a way that could bring transformation. She could hear him shyly encouraging people to pick up the printed material on their way out and to write to him on the address at the top. "I'd love to hear from you. Yes, thank you. Yes," he repeated over and over. He seemed so small then, so insignificant. Could it be the same man who had cast that magic spell moments before? When the rest of them had gone, she moved in to talk to him. He didn't see her at first and was now busily packing up his material. He looked tired and even a little disappointed. "You kind of blew our minds," she said, not sure what else to say. "Oh," he said, flinching in surprise. "I didn't see you there. Whoa, sorry to jump." "Sorry to scare you," she said, not really sorry at all. In that moment, she was feeling something other than awe. She was actually attracted to him. His little frame, his combed-over hair, his nervousness, it was somehow intensely sexy. To think that he could get the entire room to fall silent and widen their eyes and have what he described as a histamine response, elevate their level of inflammation or whatever. And now look at him, nervous, jumpy. "Don't like public speaking much, do you?" she asked, moving in a little closer. "Oh, he blinked and then straightened up. "Well, it's a part of it, part of spreading the word. Did it seem like I didn't like it?" "Not really," she said, stepping even closer. "Not while you were talking, just now." Well, yeah," he said with a nervous chuckle, and then he narrowed his eyes a little and seemed to study her face. She liked this. She really liked his attention. "Are you... Sorry, I don't mean to be, inappropriate, but do you have any Filipino ancestry?" This took her completely by surprise. This was not at all what she thought he might say. She wasn't sure what she thought he was going to say, but certainly not, "Do you have Filipino ancestry?" "Well," she said, now taking a step back, "actually, yes. My grandfather on my father's side. It's where I get my name, De Los Santos. I'm Margaret De Los Santos. My friends call me Maisie." She held out her hand, and he took it. His hand was cold and a little damp. He was nervous. But as she held his hand, she could feel him change. In a split second, his hand seemed to warm and fill out like a fattening plum. It was as if he filled up with life. "And, again, sorry, but do you have any Eastern European Ashkenazi Jewish blood? I know this is strange. It's just that you... Well, I may have found something." Now she felt strange. This was strange. This was actually a little freaky. Yes, she did have a grandmother who was Ashkenazi from Poland. Why did he know this? Was this some kind of wizard stuff? Was he reading her mind? She let go of his hand and stepped back. "I'm so sorry," he said, shaking his head. "You must think I'm some kind of, I don't know, freak or stalker or something. It's just your features are familiar. I worked with someone who was 1/4 Filipino and 1/4 Ashkenazi, and she had certain autoimmune conditions that had a pattern. I don't really want to scare you, but if you do have a condition that's considered autoimmune, like rheumatoid arthritis or colitis or whatever, then I might be able to help you." Margaret stood still and stared at him. Who was this man? Why did he know so much about her? Was this really coincidence, or was something really odd and perhaps dangerous going on? Should she run out of the room? Or should she tell him that, in fact, 2 years previous to this conference in Montreal, she had been diagnosed with a very serious autoimmune disease? She had multiple sclerosis, an incurable condition that slowly over time would shut down her nervous system until she couldn't walk or talk or move or ultimately breathe. MS would eventually kill her, and this man who stood before her, who could use his words to change a person's body, was saying that he could help her. In that moment, she was concerned about the speed at which things were moving. She thought to herself she would decline his offer and promise to be in touch. But before she left, she had one more question. "The cat," she said. "What happened to the cat? You never finished the story, and you said you would." Ray was confused at first, and then slowly nodded. "Well," he said, taking a deep breath, "there was a brook Crystal clear water flowed through it, steady, sweet, perfectly clear water. The cat was thirsty, but so weak that as soon as she bent her head down to drink, she slid slowly into the stream. It washed her. It washed through her and washed her clean. Margaret stared at Ray, and Ray stared back. Whereas she had felt the flush, the heat, the histamine response of the cat story before, now all she felt was calm, quiet ease. "She?" asked Margaret after a breath in. "I thought the cat was a he." "He was," said Ray, who now found himself getting lost in Margaret's eyes. Both of them took in each other's faces, hair, expressions, and after both breathed in and out, Margaret said, "I'll come with you. I want to come with you." Ray smiled and answered, "Good." They were married within the year. Margaret, or Maisie, as she was known at the center in Manchester, New Hampshire, became not only his research partner, but his central subject. He had never worked with anyone with multiple sclerosis and saw this as a chance to prove the therapy was powerful enough to take on one of the biggest mysteries in modern medicine. There were some challenges. One challenge was that the process required a lot of blood. Ray experimented with different imagery and descriptors in the narrative therapy. He needed to regularly draw more blood to measure the amount of naturally occurring steroids that reduced the inflammation. After a while, Margaret needed to take weeks off to replenish and build up her red blood cells again. The other challenge was that his color work showed that the three most powerful natural substances for reducing inflammation were all yellow: turmeric, ginger, and boswellia, or frankincense, all yellow. This would seem to be a solid discovery, but his theory was that it should be green that counteracts the red, not yellow. In ancient stories, it is always green that can overtake red. If yellow is in the story, it's always connected with wheat or honey, with the sweetness and abundance of life, nothing to do with healing. That being said, he and Margaret were still making progress. The minor symptoms she was experiencing, the vertigo, a slow eye, and occasional tremors in her left hand, had all but disappeared. Her lab tests showed a steady decrease in inflammation, but not much change in her natural steroid levels. And then, one day, Margaret's condition seemed to suddenly get worse, and for reasons that were unclear. Her inflammation numbers suddenly spiked, but nothing else had changed. He looked at what she had eaten, what she had done in the last 48 hours, and what narratives they had given her, but he couldn't see anything conclusive. And then he remembered Laura. Laura Cruz was the woman Raymond mentioned when he first met Margaret, the woman who was of Filipino and Ashkenazi descent, the woman who had similar features and, as it turned out, a very similar pattern of inflammation. Laura did not have MS, but she did have rheumatoid arthritis, a bad case of it. Ray didn't have much time to work with Laura before she left the study and chose a more allopathic treatment with heavy medication. In that time, however, he saw that her inflammation levels occasionally spiked. And the only thing he'd found that seemed out of the ordinary was that she had bad dreams the night before. "Did you have nightmares or bad dreams at all in the last few nights?" he asked Margaret during dinner. "Why?" she asked. Was I talking in my sleep? No, I just... He was not sure how to finish. He hadn't told her much about Laura on purpose because her case had not gone very well, and he had chosen to hide the spike in her inflammation numbers. I realized that I haven't been asking about your sleep, about dreams and that sort of thing. Margaret studied Ray for a moment. She could tell that he wasn't being completely straight, but she let it go. Actually, now that you mention it, yes, she said. I wouldn't call it a bad dream, but I did have a vivid dream. An unusually vivid dream, actually, like it was real. More than real, though, almost like when I woke up, this place here in New Hampshire, this was the dream. Ray put down his fork and focused on her. So, well, do you remember what it was about? Margaret narrowed her eyes and breathed out. No, she said, shaking her head. I mean, I have a vague image of tall grass, but that's it. A field of dry wheat, maybe? Ray's head began to spin as he pictured the images in her dream. Images of grass and then wheat. Grass is green. Wheat is yellow. There was something there. Why hadn't he pursued this before? Dreams are stories, of course, stories of the subconscious. There was information there. This was a part of the equation. He was sure of it. Later that night, he pored over his notes from working with Laura and found only one description of her dreams. It read, "Nightmare about witches burning at the stake." Burning. Flames. That's red. But witches. There was something right about that image, and a narratively dense image of a witch burning at the stake, he thought. A pivotal image in the mythology of the country. The Salem witch trials, mass hysteria, and blame, a terrible chapter in U.S. history. And an image that has come to represent wrongful accusations of the innocent outcasts of society. This discovery ushered in a new chapter in his work. He had already developed a process to extract images from fairy tales and mythology and test their ability to heal or harm, to use them essentially as magic spells. Now he could do the same thing with dream images. But he needed to know more. He needed his wife, Margaret, Maisie, to remember more of her dreams, especially the dreams that resulted in spikes in her inflammation count. And to accomplish that, Dr. Raymond Anadar turned a corner in his methods. He made a fundamental shift in his ethics and standards. Because in order to get the information he sought, in order to document the research, he began to slowly, incrementally, kill his wife.